Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to teach you the basics of using Fusion 360, and by the end, you'll be able to design and make your own fidget spinner. So, fire up Fusion 360 and follow along. If you're going to make your own fidget spinner, you'll need a few materials. You'll need a ball bearing for the center so it can spin, and you should add some weights to the end of each arm. For the ball bearings, there's a link in the description below to where I bought mine from Amazon. For the weights, I'm just using 1/2-inch nuts I bought at Home Depot. Before we get started in Fusion 360, I want to explain two key concepts. The first is that Fusion 360 is a parametric modeling program, which is different than most other modeling programs out there. And all that really means is it keeps track of all the different things you do step by step to build your model. So you can go back at any given time and change one of the parameters in the timeline. So for instance, if you had a hole you made that's 10 millimeters and you realize, oh, I need that to be 12 millimeters, you can just go back and find that step where you made that hole and change the size without having to actually mess with the model directly. The second key concept is that most models you make in Fusion 360 will start out as sketches. And a sketch is just a two-dimensional drawing of what the object will look like when you end up then extruding it up to actually build the 3D model. A good analogy would be as if you're trying to 3D model your house. The sketch would be a floor plan. So you'd make the floor plan, and then from that you can actually raise up the walls that would form the house. In our fidget spinner, we're mostly going to be working in the sketch, which will draw out the shape of what we're going to end up raising. So with those two concepts in mind, let's open Fusion 360 and get started. Starting with a brand new design, the first thing you want to do is click the New Sketch button. Choose the XY plane to draw the sketch so it'll already be aligned flat for your printer. So first, we'll draw the hole where the bearing will go, and for that, we'll use the Center Diameter Circle tool. I measured the outside diameter of the bearing as 22 millimeters, so we'll make this circle slightly larger at 22.1 millimeters, and put the center of the circle at the origin. Next, we'll draw the hole for the Hex Nut, and we'll use the Circumscribed Polygon tool for that one. For this tool, you can type in the radius, so we'll use 9.55 millimeters, which is slightly larger than what I actually measured of the Hex Nut. Next, I want to align the two holes vertically and control how far apart they are. To accomplish both, I'll use the tools on the right side of the screen, which are known as constraints. First, I'll click on the top edge of the polygon and then press the horizontal vertical constraint, which will force that edge to stay horizontal. Next, I'll use the line tool to connect the centers of the two holes. With that line still selected, press the horizontal vertical constraint again, and now the hex hole snaps directly above the hole for the bearing. Finally, press the D key, which stands for dimensions, and you can now click and drag out from the line to exactly define how far apart the centers are. I use 30 millimeters. The dimension tool can be used for most of your sketch elements, so you can define lengths, diameters, even angles between lines. And here's a useful trick for drawing lines that are only used for measurement instead of shapes. Select the line and then press the X key on your keyboard. Now, the line is dashed instead of solid, which shows that it's just a guideline, not a shape line. Now, let's add another circle to give the center some width. Put the center of the circle at the origin again, but this time the diameter is 28 millimeters. That outside loop will end up being what we print. Make another circle around the Hex Nut that's also 28 millimeters. Now, to connect the two pieces, I'm going to get a little fancy. I want some nice arcs to connect them together, but I want to be sure they have a consistent width between the arcs. So, I'll draw some circles with the same center point and use those circles as guidelines for my arcs. Let me show you what I mean. So, I draw out two new circles with the same center and set the diameters 6 millimeters apart. One is at 29 millimeters and the other is at 35. As you can see, the sketch is starting to get pretty messy, so that's why I'll use these circles as guidelines. So I'll select each circle and press the X key. To draw the arcs, I use the Center Point Arc tool. Now I can set the center of each arc to the same center as the circles and then draw them out so they touch both the hex nut and the bearing pieces. And to clean up the sketch a little, once the arcs are done, I can delete the circle guidelines because I don't need them anymore. Next, use the same technique to draw 2 more sets of arcs. So now there are a total of 3 pieces connecting the bearing to the hex nut. And with that, the sketch is done, so hit the Stop Sketch button in the lower right of your screen. Now you can see the sketch sitting in 3D space. So let's turn that sketch into an actual 3D model. Select the pieces of the sketch that you want to become part of your model. I chose to select the entire sketch first and then shift-click the whole pieces I wanted to remove. Next, press the E key to extrude the sketch, or you can find that tool under the Create menu at the top. When you extrude, you have to decide how far to extrude the sketch. In our case, the bearing is 7 millimeters high, so type in 7 millimeters and press Enter. Now you have a 3D model. Of course, it doesn't look like a fidget spinner yet because we have to add in the other 2 hex nuts. Luckily, Fusion 360 makes this really easy. Under the Create menu, go to Pattern and choose Circular Pattern. This will make copies of whatever you select in a circular pattern. Make sure the pattern type is set to bodies and then choose your object. Then press the Axis button and select the Z-axis, which is the blue one. Set the quantity to 3 and then press OK. Now it looks like a spinner, but we still have one more step for this object. The pattern tool creates copies of the original model, and we have to combine them. So first, select all 3 bodies. Then go to Modify, Combine. Make sure the operation is set to Join, and turn off the 2 checkboxes. Once you press OK, you finally have a single model that's your spinner. Before we send this over to the printer, let's design a grip that will cover the bearing while you spin it. So press the New Sketch button and choose the XY plane again. Draw a new circle off to the side and make it 23 millimeters in diameter, which is just larger than the outside of the bearing. Draw a second circle with the same center, but its diameter is 11.4 millimeters. That measurement is slightly smaller than the outside of the inner ring of the bearing. Finally, draw a third circle with a diameter of 8 millimeters. That matches the size of the hole in the middle of the bearing. Hit the Stop Sketch button and let's make the object. Select the entire sketch and extrude it up 3 millimeters. This base will be where you hold the spinner. Next, select just the inner 2 circles. You'll probably need to unhide the sketch and temporarily hide the body to see the sketch. You can do that using the controls on the left side of your screen. After you select those 2 circles, make sure the body is visible again and then extrude. Make sure the operation is set to Join and extrude it up 3.5 millimeters. This small lip will rest on the inner ring of the bearing and give the rest of the grip some clearance while it spins. Finally, select just the inner circle of the sketch and extrude it one more time. Again, make sure the operation is set to Join and extrude it to 6.5 millimeters. This will be the peg that secures it into the center of the bearing. And that's it, we're done. You just designed your own fidget spinner. So now the modeling's all done, so all that's left to do is print it out and put it together. I printed the model using generic PLA I bought at Micro Center. Don't forget to print 2 of the grip pieces, 1 for each side of the spinner. The bearing and nuts fit very tightly into the spinner, so I used a scrap piece of wood and a hammer to force everything into place. Make sure the bearing is sitting flush on both sides. If it's sticking out too much on either end, it won't spin right. To finish it up, push the grips into the center of the bearing, and then give it a spin. So that's it. Those are the very basics of using Fusion 360, and now we have our fidget spinner. So I hope you liked this video. If you enjoyed this format of the video of more of a tutorial, let me know in the comments. And if you make your own with your own design, show me a picture. Let me see what you made. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And hopefully I'll see you again soon. Thanks.